The Basic Education Law Amendment Bill is back in the spotlight, with some amendments welcomed but some questioned. Just yesterday, Leondale High School learners opposed the bill that will see alcohol being sold at schools. Now, this bill proposes changes to the South African Schools Act, which will also seek to hand control to the Education Department in determining a school's language policy. Country Director of the Education Partnerships Group, Jonathan Molver, joins me now for more. Very good morning to you, Jonathan. Thank you for your time. Civil society and education experts alike have been up in arms over parts of the proposed amendments to the Basic Education Law Bill. Which proposed areas are you concerned about?
Morning, and thanks for hosting me this morning. Firstly, let me just state that I think there are a number of welcome proposals in the bill that have the potential to radically improve governance and therefore access, opportunity and quality for our learners. But on the whole, I think there are a number of things that could do with revision and consideration. Firstly, I think that while the increased regulation and oversight is a huge step in the right direction, I'm concerned that there's a fairly binary and narrow view that we appear to be taking to the distribution of power and responsibility. The way that it's written currently seems to imply that the governance functions should sit either with the SGB or with senior officials in the department. And given that there's limited capacity at both school community and the departmental level, I think that the bill should be giving greater consideration to the distribution or sharing of this responsibility with others in civil society and across our nation. So one example of this is the twinning model that was adopted in the Western Cape, where Westerford High School and Claremont High School effectively shared governance resources as well as infrastructure while setting up Claremont High School. And this school's gone on to become one of the highest performing schools in the Western Cape under the leadership of the principal there, Murray Gibbons. There are other approaches too. At my organisation, the Education Partnerships Group, we work together with provincial and national governments to put in place required policy and regulatory controls that allow partnerships with civil society and those in the public sector. And one example of this was the development of the Collaboration Schools model, which we put together in partnership with the Western Cape Education Department and some local donors. It's a model where not-for-profit operators partner with public schools to provide additional governance and management capacity. And I think we should be considering more models like this that add capacity to a state and a nation that currently lacks the resources and capacity required to radically improve outcomes for kids.
Yeah. There's also been concern that the department, under this proposed bill, may authorize placements with minimal consultation. Stakeholders in the homeschooling sector have raised their concerns about this bill, making no provision for them. How can their views be heard in the amendment process?
Sure. So I think on the move to regulate language and admissions policies, I think this is a double-edged sword. I think on the one hand, these sorts of policies have continued to divide our nation in terms of access and equality, and regulating these policies gives the department an opportunity to ensure that there's greater diversity, inclusion and equality across our schools. And on the other hand, it could be problematic in terms of unnecessary or excessive input or regulation. So I think communities deserve still to have some input into these kinds of policies, and we just need to make sure that the balance of responsibility and power is carefully distributed there. In terms of other stakeholders making a contribution towards the bill and raising their concerns, it's not too late. The bill's still open for written submissions. The deadline's been extended until 4 p.m. on the 15th of August this year. So I would encourage other stakeholders to get their comments and suggestions in as soon as possible. They can do this via email to the bellabill02@parliament.gov.za, or they can get online and access the bill, have a read, and then make their written contributions. Following written contributions, there will also be an opportunity for public hearings as well.
Perhaps let's expand a little on the school placement parts. We know that on Friday, the Gauteng Education Department's online placements for grades 1 and 8 opened. How does this proposed bill factor in relation to the admission of the learners in public schools, especially because we know from past experience that every year Gauteng and the Western Cape are inundated with late arrivals from neighbouring provinces and countries, and they're expected to find school placements for them.
Yeah, thanks. It's a really good point. I mean, this is one of the other issues that concerns me with regards to the bill, is that we're not thinking innovatively enough, I think, or creatively enough with regards to education delivery, particularly around the issue of school placements. So as you rightly referenced, there are huge issues with the intake in the Western Cape and Gauteng in particular. I think it's in excess of 17,000 children a year migrating from the Eastern Cape to the Western Cape, and more than 26,000 every year from Limpopo and other provinces to Gauteng. These children arrive late and they're desperate for schools. Now, it costs us roughly 70 million to build a new school, and this takes time as well. We don't have the money and we can't build them fast enough to create places for these children. The bill's proposing that HODs amend or approve admissions and language policies, and in effect then hold the power to place children in schools with, it would seem, minimal consultation with schools. This can be problematic because we're already working in overcrowded schools, and we could be contributing to increased teacher-to-pupil ratios, which are already beyond manageable in many of our schools. So I think that as an alternative, we should be considering different modes of provision. We should be thinking about things like blended or remote learning, given that COVID's already accelerated our ability to deliver content online. There's a lot that we can do or need to do to ensure that children in remote regions have hardware and access to internet and electricity, but there are exciting organizations like UCT Online who are proving that content can be delivered at a fraction of the cost of a traditional brick and mortar school. People would say that you can't replace a teacher with a laptop, and I agree with this, but at the moment we have upwards of 50,000 children a year sitting waiting for placements, and simply granting the department the authority to place them at will isn't going to solve the problem of overcrowded classrooms or improve service delivery in those classrooms, often in very difficult conditions.
Yeah, I mean, just yesterday, still speaking to some concerns here, Leondale High School learners opposed the bill that could see alcohol being sold at schools. Is there a thorough understanding of what this essentially means?
Sorry, is there a thorough understanding of what opposing the sale of alcohol?
Yeah, what the sale of alcohol will mean. I mean, are we reading between the lines, or is it really just explaining that perhaps alcohol will be sold at certain events for parents? Is there some confusion around the alcohol being sold?
I think there's a lot of confusion around this particular aspect of the bill, and my understanding of this was that the provision within the bill was introduced in order to increase the regulation and oversight of the sale of alcohol on school premises, which in many cases already takes place without any regulation or oversight. So my understanding was that the bill sought to ensure that in legalizing the process, there would be sufficient regulatory controls in place to monitor the sale of alcohol under specific conditions, as opposed to this taking place on an ad hoc basis, as it currently does in many of our schools.
And very quickly, I mean, you touched a little bit on the good news, that it can't all be bad news in its entirety. The benefits of the appointments of SGBs. Talk to us a little bit about that. Is the current system working?
Yeah, so in some places this system's working. I think the intention behind the SGB model was good. It was about democratizing education and creating access and opportunity for communities to input on things like language, admissions and core school policies. I think that the proposal to increase reporting and transparency from SGBs to the state is massively encouraging, because I think we've heard far too many stories in the past of corruption and nepotism, which ultimately undermine the flow of resources from the state to the people who should be the recipients, our children. I'm also encouraged that the HOD will have the power to disband underperforming or corrupt SGBs if absolutely necessary. Governance is a huge lever in education, and if effective, has the capacity to transform our children's life chances. and if not, well, it can completely ruin them. So there are often good grounds for SGBs to be disbanded, and this proposal seeks to ensure that the department has the necessary power, and I think that's a step in the right direction. So I think there are a number of positives coming out of this, and I think if correctly regulated, then we could see some improvement in governance and oversight in our schools.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for weighing in on this conversation, Jonathan Molver, who is Country Director of the Education Partnerships Group. Thank you for your time.